Welcome everybody to another episode of our digital art nights here at the Brickstar Museum. For those of you who are familiar with what we do here, usually in a regular year, the museum hosts an art night every Friday in the summer or every second Friday, where we open the museum until 8 o'clock in the evening, and we welcome visitors to come in for free and enjoy the exhibits that we have going on, both art and historical, based on what we have going on that year. With the pandemic, we've opted not to stay open late into the evening, but we've decided to be bringing you these programs digitally, so you're able to either watch them at your own pace or every Friday, as we'll be releasing them throughout the summer. So I want to remind everybody that the museum is open regular hours. If you want to come in and you feel comfortable coming in, we would love to see you. We're open with limited capacity, and we always are encouraging mask wearing, as well as plenty of hand sanitizer here in the galleries to go around. So if you're comfortable coming in, we look forward to seeing you then. And of course, you'll be able to see in person some of the pieces that the artists will be talking about in the videos following my introduction here. So as I said, art nights originally started a couple of years ago, and we were open for free, and we had local artists teaching visitors about various different types of art, like pen and ink or how to create a comic book. So really fun things to do. And we'll be working on bringing some of those things to you digitally as well. So this year we're going to be posting digital artist visits, so videos, talking with local artists every Friday to our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, as well as our website. So as I said, they'll be accessible to you whenever you would like to watch them. And I just want to mention that this project is funded in part by a grant from the Maine Arts Commission, which is a independent state agency supported by the National Endowment for the Arts. So we really appreciate the support of Maine Arts Commission, especially in this process that we're all still getting used to. So as we explore artwork tonight, I hope that you enjoy. And of course, if you have any questions for the artist, these are obviously pre-recorded. But if you have any questions for the artist or for the museum staff, make sure that you put your questions below in the comments, obviously on Facebook or YouTube, and of course on our website, there's a comment section as well. And then we will work on getting those questions answered for you. Tonight, we're going to be visiting with Paula Gallucci, who is a Kennebunk resident, and she is also in the museum's bicentennial show called Perspectives 2020. Paula is a costume designer and a generally all-around creative person who has created a series of dioramas for the museum's bicentennial show. So she'll be talking to us about her creative process around what she's made, her research that she's done, which is pretty extensive, as well as her background and where she came from and what she's doing nowadays. So here's Paula.
Paula, thank you for joining us at the Brickstar Museum today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we're standing with Paula's dioramas, and she did a huge amount of work for this exhibit. So we're going to be talking to her about her process today. But to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in your industry?
Oh, I'd love to. Actually, I got started kind of by accident. I was really shy when I was young, and my mother thought, well, let's get her into dance because she won't have to talk. And dance became acting, acting became touring with theater companies, and when I couldn't get acting work, I would work as a seamstress or a costume designer, or an assistant to a costume designer, or an assistant to a fashion designer. And after years of doing this back and forth, I really discovered I had a love for costume design. And I thought, well, why am I working for all these other people? Why don't I make my own costume design business? So when I was out in California and Los Angeles, I started Paula in Stitches, and I've recently moved back to Maine, and I'm still continuing my sewing and design business, which is wonderful being back in Maine, and being a part of this historic exhibit is really great.
That's awesome. Thank you, Paula. So why don't you tell us a little bit, when I think I contacted you long ago now in 2019 about this
Yes.
exhibit.
Oh my gosh, it was a year ago.
So, and you obviously chose a great topic, but what was your first kind of inspiration to do this?
Well, knowing that we were going to use an object as some sort of historical object to motivate our piece, I thought, well, we're celebrating the bicentennial. However, I don't ever want to not include the indigenous people of this area, and there really wasn't a lot of information about the Almushakwe. So I was really adamant about including them. But as a designer, I said, you know, I want to create what we would consider an indigenous costume. However, through my research and through working with Carrie Helm at Plymouth Plantation, who is the Indigenous Cultural Programs Manager, she explained to me the referral of an indigenous costume or a Native American costume. They don't want that label. It's clothing to them, and they consider it their garments, their clothing. And from there, I evolved into my education that there is a lot of racism in costume design and lack of inclusiveness for all people, Asian, Black, Native American, you name it, unless you specifically Google Black historical costuming, Asian historical costuming, you're really just going to get a lot of European and English and white references and very little about anybody else. So just knowing all this and learning all this, my idea of just creating 2 costumes with some kids with some cornhusk dolls evolved into, I want to create a utopian storyline. I would love it if we could think back in history and wonder what it would have been like if the children were in charge of what was to happen. And wouldn't it have been, because children learn hate, they learn war, they're the natural peacemakers, really, until they become negatively influenced. And so that's why I called it the Peacemakers. And I wanted to create something that these 2 children who would have made these dolls to play with, and they would have shown maybe the things that they would be learning to do as adults: fishing, making their own toys, painting, making pottery, working in the farm or gathering eggs. So I said, well, let me create these dioramas of something they would have done, sharing each other's culture, learning about each other, and really getting along. And so it went from just a simple concept, and it kind of evolved into a really fun storyline for me. And it was just a beautiful process of creating these little dioramas and creating these 2 small people who really have become people to me. You know, they've been keeping me company for about 6 months. So yeah, it's just, it was just a pleasure to learn and to evolve my designs to be inclusive and to create just a fun little utopian world, which we're not really seeing much of right now.
That is true.
True.
So you did, as you just referenced, a lot of research in terms of what type of clothing people were wearing, the materials even.
Yes.
Can you talk about, and you've already talked about Plymouth Plantation, but can you talk a little bit about who you've reached out to for information?
Oh, well, I reached out, of course, to the Brickstore Museum too, and through that, Mr. Baker from Salem State had a wonderful paper he had written a few years back about the Almushakwe and the tribes that were here that didn't last very long into the 17th century, but it was just wonderful to know that we did have our own kind of tribe of people that was residing in this area, from the Saco River up to like the Kennebec and everything. And it was just incredible how open people were to sharing this information, because it was really exciting to know. All I ever heard of was that we were kind of grouped in with some of the northern tribes and kind of the Wampanoag in Massachusetts, and they were kind of like, basically, they would all have the same clothes and they would have the same toys and things. So it was really exciting to find out that we had our own history and our own tribes down here. And it was just great that so many people were anxious to share that knowledge, and I really hope more people get to read these papers and we get to represent these people more. So it was really fantastic. I was very happy to find the help that I needed, especially in the quarantine, because nobody was home. I mean, everybody was home, nobody was at work.
That's right.
So yeah.
Exactly. So in the process of creating all of these, did you find, of course you just kind of referenced the quarantine, but what were your stumbling points, or was there things that surprised you in your process?
There was an issue of acquiring the materials I needed in a timely manner. I was expecting, get in the car, go to fabric store, buy fabric, come home, sew.
Right.
Unfortunately, I had to order everything online because all the stores were closed. And unfortunately, there was a lot of sitting around and waiting, and nervousness that I wasn't going to get anything sewn. And so that really was the major stumbling point. Actually, by the time I did get some of the materials, the stores had reopened, and I was like, I could have just waited. But,
yeah.
You know, throughout the whole process, I had met so many great people through Etsy stores who do historically accurate fabrics and textiles. I found a wonderful man in Canada who does acquire hides humanely, and it was just really great to know that I could resource these things and do it without, like, I didn't want to just go, this is close enough. It's really important to me to do things the right way with historically accurate costuming and garment creations. So that was really the main issue. And also finding the information about the Mushakway tribe, about what did their clothes look like. And there really wasn't much other than Champlain's description from, I believe it was 1600s, just stating basically what they kind of looked like, what they kind of wore, and there was a sketch, but it was pretty basic. So I did do a lot of asking questions like, would they have had the blue paint at this time to paint their mantle and their other garments? You know, what techniques did they use to decorate? So I learned to do some quilling, which obviously is not the easiest thing to learn, using porcupine quills. I taught myself how to do a braid for what they would have worn as a belt. They did finger weaving, they called it, and they would use wampum beads, which are made out of a seashell that is local to our area of New England. So it was really great. It was wonderful. I found a cobbler who could cobble the historically accurate shoe. And I found a knitter who could knit the historically accurate stocking. I was hoping I could show these a little easier, but unfortunately, it wouldn't have been respectful for her to hold her dress up. But yeah, it was just so great to find so many artists and so many historians that really wanted to not only participate, but to educate. And it was great. Even the cobble guy knew history. He was like, oh, did you know that they did not make a left and right shoe, but they would actually just make one kind of shoe. You would put it on your foot, and it would eventually form and shape your foot. I had no idea about this. And if you were wealthy, you had a servant that wore them for you before you wore them.
Oh, goodness.
Yes.
Hopefully
so that was really cool. I was like, that was great.
Hello, you're so interested in history, aren't you?
Murtaugh's visiting us.
Thank you for not eating my dioramas.
So last question for you, I think, is what was your favorite piece amongst your entire craft to make?
I have to say, out of all the dioramas, the Fisherman was just so much fun because I used the seashells to create the ocean waves. I made the fish and the little crabs that I thought were just so cute out of clay. And everything that I did for all the dioramas, if they weren't pre-made, like the little jars in the tradesman diorama, obviously I didn't make those. But if there was a box or an egg or something, if I didn't make it myself, weave it myself, I acquired it from nature. I went out and I picked the shells from the ocean, and I found these tree stumps in my backyard, and so that was the most fun. But I think my Fisherman Diorama is by far my favorite, because I just found so many fun things. Even in his necklace, I found this little claw on the beach, and just thought, yeah, this was what he would wear. He's the fisherman. He would represent himself as the tribe's fisherman. So I was really having fun with that, and I thoroughly enjoyed making the corn husk dolls. I even turned Native American music on my porch while I was making them for inspiration. I really do enjoy trying to really engulf myself in whatever I'm doing as much as possible, from the music I choose to listen to. Maybe that's the actor in me. I kind of like to do, I don't know, I just like to immerse myself in all facets, and so that was just really fun. And I loved making their hair out of corn husks.
Oh wow, okay, yep.
I originally wanted the dolls, they're not really dolls, they're dress forms, to be giant corn husks. But then I said, I think I'd like to do these dioramas. That's when the diorama idea came up, and I said, well, I'll do something with these corn husks that I have left over. And then I said, well, how am I going to make their hair? And I had used horsehair for a lot of the dolls. And I wanted, maybe I could make horsehair out of her wig, but it just didn't look really beautiful, and it kind of looked kind of messy. So I said, well, let me experiment with corn husks and dyeing them and braiding them and doing different stuff. And I even had a curling iron to curl her little curls.
Oh, yep.
and I said, this looks great. I'm happy with this. It looks like hair.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It was a fun, it was a fun process for sure.
Wow, that's really fantastic. Yeah, for those who are going to come visit the exhibit and the museum, the detail in this is you'll have to come see it in person to be able to see it.
Thank you so much. I really did enjoy it. I enjoyed immersing myself in both the history of my culture as well as the history of the Alnushakoi. Even just the techniques of painting the mantle. I looked up how they made their paint, and I bought pigment, and I mixed my own paint in the seashells, and then I painted them as they would have. They wouldn't have used brushes. They would have used stamping or quills to paint rocks or edging of tools, and that's how I did it. And it's just, I feel like I learned so much, and I really think it shows in the display that there's so much to learn about history and cultures that we haven't learned it all yet.
For sure.
No matter how old we are. There's always more to learn.
Exactly. And that is a fantastic ending point. So thank you, Paula, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And hopefully we'll have you back to talk more about your process.
Oh, I hope so. I really do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.